They dragged her barefoot through the ice, mocking her screams as the blizzard swallowed her whole. To the Frost Hollow pack, Celeste was nothing, a broken omega, a traitor, a waste of space. They didn't just exile her, they sentenced her to a freezing death in the Deadlands, betting on how long she'd last before the cold stopped her heart. But they made a fatal mistake. They thought she was dying alone. They didn't know that the most feared predator in the world, the Alpha King himself, was hunting in those woods, and he wasn't looking for prey. He was looking for his queen, and when he finds out what they did to her, the snow will turn red. The wind didn't howl, it screamed. It tore through the thin, tattered fabric of Celeste's grey shift, biting into her skin like 1,000 invisible needles. But the cold wasn't what hurt the most. It was the laughter. "Look at her shiver," Margot sneered, wrapping her arm possessively around Alpha Jasper's waist. Margot was wearing a thick fur coat, pristine and white, contrasting sharply with Celeste's bruised, dirt-streaked skin. "Do you think she'll last the hour, Jasper?" Jasper, the alpha of the Frost Hollow pack, and the man Celeste had secretly loved since childhood, didn't even look her in the eye. He stared at the horizon of the Deadlands, a stretch of forbidden forest where the temperatures dropped so low that even a shifted wolf could freeze to death if they weren't careful. For a human form omega without a coat, it was an execution. "She poisoned the pack's supplies, Margot," Jasper said, his voice void of emotion, though his jaw was tight. "She is a traitor. Traitors don't get sympathy." "I didn't!" Celeste cried out, her voice cracking. Her lips were already turning a terrifying shade of blue. She fell to her knees in the snow, the ice crust cutting into her skin. "Jasper, please! You know me. I've served this pack my whole life. I've cooked your meals, I've mended your clothes. I would never hurt the pack." "The poison was found under your mattress, Celeste," Jasper snapped, finally looking down at her. His eyes, usually a warm amber, were cold and hard. "Stop lying, it's pathetic." It was a setup. Celeste knew it, and deep down she suspected Jasper knew it too. Margot had hated Celeste ever since the pack elders mentioned that Celeste's bloodline, though dormant and weak, was historically compatible with high-ranking alphas. Margot wanted to be Luna. She couldn't risk a runt like Celeste suddenly presenting a challenge. So Margot had planted the wolfsbane. "Drag her to the boundary line," Jasper commanded. Two enforcers, brutish men named Colton and Vance, grabbed Celeste by her upper arms. They didn't walk her, they dragged her. Her bare feet scraped uselessly against the frozen earth, leaving 2 trails of disturbed snow. "Please," Celeste begged, looking back at the gathered pack. She saw faces she had known her entire life. Her aunt, her cousins, the baker who gave her stale bread. They all looked away. Silence. That was the betrayal that cut the deepest. Not one of them spoke up. They were letting her die to keep the peace with Jasper and his cruel new mate-to-be. They reached the edge of the territory. The trees here were black and twisted, stripped of leaves, standing like skeletal sentinels guarding the entrance to hell. Colton threw her forward. She landed hard on her shoulder, the impact knocking the wind out of her. "If you cross back over the line," Jasper called out from a safe distance, "we kill you on sight. If the cold doesn't take you, the rogues will. Goodbye, Celeste." "Jasper, please," she whispered. But the wind stole her voice. He turned his back. The pack followed him. Celeste watched them leave. She watched the warm glow of the packhouse lights in the distance, a beacon of a home that was no longer hers. She tried to stand, but her legs were numb. The temperature was dropping rapidly as night set in. She forced herself to crawl. She had to find shelter, a cave, a hollow log, anything. "I will not die here," she told herself. "I will not give Margot the satisfaction. She stumbled deeper into the Deadlands. The snow began to fall heavier, a white curtain dropping over the world. Her vision blurred. Her hands, red and raw, stopped feeling pain and started feeling heavy, like blocks of wood. She walked for what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes. Her mind began to play tricks on her. She thought she saw a fire in the distance, but when she stumbled toward it, it was just the moon reflecting off a patch of ice. Finally, her body gave up. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed face first into a snowdrift. The cold wasn't painful anymore. It felt warm, seductively warm. It whispered to her, telling her to close her eyes, to sleep. Just for a minute, she thought. I'll just rest my eyes for a minute. As the darkness took her, she didn't hear the snap of a twig nearby. She didn't hear the low, thunderous growl that vibrated through the frozen ground. She didn't see the massive shadow looming over her broken body. She just felt peace. Alpha King Kieran did not like the Deadlands, but he respected them. They were the only place on the continent where the politics of the council didn't matter. Here, only the strong survived. He was in his wolf form, a massive, midnight black beast standing nearly 7 feet tall at the shoulder. His eyes were glowing violet, the mark of the royal Lycan bloodline. Flanking him were his 2 most trusted beta guards, Silas and Declan, both in their wolf forms, though they looked like pups compared to Kieran's sheer size. They were tracking a group of rogue wolves that had been raiding the northern borders of his kingdom. The scent trail had gone cold hours ago, buried under the fresh blizzard. "We should turn back, my king," Silas linked, his mental voice tight with discomfort. "The storm is worsening. Even our fur won't protect us if the temperature drops another 10 degrees. Kieran huffed, a puff of steam exploding from his snout. "We patrol another mile. Rogues are stupid enough to camp in this weather. I want them gone." He pushed forward, his massive paws crushing the snow effortlessly. The wind whipped at his fur, but he barely felt it. His inner wolf was agitated, pacing within his mind. It had been like this for days, restless, searching, yearning for something it couldn't name. Suddenly Kieran stopped. He lifted his head, sniffing the air. The scent of pine, ozone, and something else. Something sweet, like vanilla and winter jasmine. But underneath the sweetness, there was the metallic tang of blood and the sour stench of death. "What is it?" Declan asked, sensing the king's tension. "Mate!" Kieran's wolf roared in his head. "Mate! Dying!" Kieran didn't explain. He didn't wait for his guards. He launched himself forward, tearing through the trees with a speed that defied the laws of physics. The connection slammed into him like a freight train. It was faint, flickering like a candle in a hurricane. She was fading. He crested a ridge and saw it. A small, pathetic lump in the snow. It barely looked human. It looked like a pile of discarded rags. Kieran shifted mid-stride, his bones cracking and reshaping as he slid into his human form. He didn't care about the cold hitting his bare skin. His alpha blood ran hot enough to melt ice. He fell to his knees beside the body, his hands shaking. He turned her over. Her face was pale as death, her lips blue, her eyelashes frozen together with ice crystals. She was tiny, malnourished. Her clothes were a mockery. Thin, torn cotton in a blizzard. "No," Kieran growled, a sound that came from the depths of his soul. "No, you do not die on me. I waited 300 years for you. You do not die today." He pressed his ear to her chest. Thump. Thump. It was slow, agonizingly slow. Her heart was giving up. "Silas! Declan!" Kieran roared, his voice echoing through the frozen forest like thunder. His guards burst through the trees a second later, shifting immediately when they saw their king on his knees. "My king!" Silas gasped, looking at the girl. Is she? She is mine, Kieran snarled, pulling the girl's frozen body against his chest. He bit into his own wrist, tearing the vein open. Drink. Damn you, drink. He pressed his bleeding wrist to her blue lips. The lichen blood was potent. It could heal fatal wounds, regenerate limbs, and bring the nearly dead back to life. But she had to swallow. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. The blood smeared over her chin. Please, Kieran whispered, his forehead resting against hers. The mighty Alpha King, who had slaughtered armies and bowed to no one, was begging. Please, little one. A small, reflex swallow. Then another. Her body jolted. A gasp, ragged and wet, tore from her throat. Kieran didn't waste a second. He scooped her up into his arms, her weight negligible to him. She was ice cold against his burning skin. Declan, strip off your coat, Kieran ordered. Sir, give me your coat, now! Declan scrambled to obey, handing over his heavy tactical jacket. Kieran wrapped the girl in it, burying her deep within the warmth. Who did this? Silas asked, looking at the tracks in the snow. Someone dragged her here, my king. Look at the trails. They left her here on purpose. Kieran looked at the drag marks leading back toward the south, toward the Frost Hollow territory. His eyes flashed violet, glowing so bright they illuminated the dark woods. A growl built in his chest, so low it vibrated the snow off the nearby branches. Frost Hollow, Kieran said, the name tasting like bile. They threw her away. He looked down at the unconscious girl in his arms. The color was slowly, very slowly, returning to her cheeks thanks to his blood. They think she is dead, Kieran said, his voice deadly calm. We will let them believe that. For now. We are taking her to the citadel, Silas asked. We are taking her to the royal suite, Kieran corrected. And Silas, send word to the High Council. Tell them I am declaring a blood feud. Against who, sir? Against anyone who ever touched her. Kieran turned and began to run back toward his territory, cradling his frozen mate as if she were the most fragile, precious thing in the universe. The Frost Hollow pack had wanted a tragedy. Kieran would give them a war. Consciousness returned to Celeste not as a flood, but as a slow, terrifying trickle. The first thing she registered was the heat. She wasn't cold. In fact, she was drowning in warmth, a heavy, suffocating comfort that felt alien to her skin. The biting wind of the Deadlands was gone, replaced by the scent of sandalwood, burning pine, and something distinctly masculine. I'm dead, she thought, panic spiking in her chest. I died in the snow. This is the afterlife. But if this was the afterlife, why did her body ache so much? Every inch of her skin felt bruised, her muscles stiff and screaming in protest as she tried to shift. Her eyes snapped open. She wasn't lying on the frozen ground. She was in a bed, a massive, four-poster monstrosity draped in sheets of charcoal silk and heavy fur throws. The room was dim, lit only by the roaring fire in a stone hearth large enough to roast a whole stag. The walls were made of dark, polished obsidian, and the ceiling was so high it was lost in the shadows. This wasn't the packhouse attic where she slept on a thin mattress. This was a palace. Rogues! The thought hit her like a physical blow. Jasper had warned her. If the cold doesn't take you, the rogues will. She scrambled backward, ignoring the scream of protest from her stiff limbs. She fell off the other side of the high bed, landing on a plush rug with a heavy thud. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had to hide. She had to find a weapon. She scanned the room frantically. There was a heavy silver candlestick on a mahogany dresser. She grabbed it, her hands trembling violently, and backed herself into the corner of the room, crouching between a heavy wardrobe and the stone wall. She squeezed her eyes shut, clutching the candlestick to her chest. "Please, let it be quick." The heavy oak door creaked open. Celeste stopped breathing. Steps approached. Heavy, deliberate steps. They didn't sound like the frantic, scuffling steps of a rogue scavenger. These were the footsteps of a predator who owned the ground he walked on. "You can come out," a voice rumbled. It was deep, a baritone that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards and straight into her bones. "I can hear your heart beating, little one. It sounds like a hummingbird." Celeste didn't move. She pressed herself harder into the corner. A figure stepped into the light of the fireplace. He was massive. That was the only word her terrified mind could supply. He stood well over 6 feet, his shoulders broad enough to block out the firelight. He was wearing loose grey sweatpants and a black t-shirt that strained against his chest and arms. His hair was dark, falling in messy waves over his forehead, but it was his eyes that froze her in place. They were violet. In the wolf world, eye color meant rank. Brown and hazel were common. Amber and gold were alphas. But violet was a myth. It belonged to the royal bloodline, the Lycans, the killers of alphas. The man stopped when he saw the empty bed. He scanned the room, his nostrils flaring slightly. His gaze snapped to the corner where she was hiding. He didn't lunge. He didn't shout. He slowly raised his hands, palms open. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, his voice dropping to a soothing, rough whisper. He took a step closer. "Stay back," Celeste croaked. Her voice was wrecked, raw from screaming in the snow. She brandished the candlestick, though she knew it would do nothing against a creature like him. "Don't touch me." The man stopped instantly. A flash of pain crossed his face. Not physical pain, but something like regret. "I won't touch you," he promised. "My name is Kieran. You are in my home. You are safe." "Kieran," Celeste whispered. The name sounded familiar, buried deep in the history lessons the pack elders taught the high-ranking children. Lessons she had only heard by listening through the vents. King Kieran, the wolf of the north. You're the king," she breathed, the candlestick slipping from her numb fingers and clattering onto the floor. "And you," Kieran said, taking a slow step forward, then another, until he was kneeling on the rug just a few feet away from her, "are freezing, and you need to eat." He reached behind him and pulled a tray forward that she hadn't noticed he was carrying. On it was a bowl of steaming broth and a glass of water. "Why?" Celeste asked, tears finally spilling over. "Why did you save me? I'm nothing. I'm an exile, a traitor." Kieran's jaw tightened. A low growl rumbled in his chest, involuntary and terrifying. Celeste flinched, curling into a ball and shielding her head with her arms. "Don't hit me," she sobbed. "Please don't hit me, I'll be quiet." The room went deadly silent. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackling fire. When Kieran spoke, his voice was thick with suppressed rage, but she sensed it wasn't directed at her. "Look at me," he commanded. It was an alpha command, laced with power she couldn't resist. Celeste slowly lowered her arms and looked up. Kieran was still kneeling, but his eyes were glowing faintly. He looked as if he wanted to tear the world apart, yet his hands, resting on his knees, were perfectly still. "Who did this to you?" he asked. "Who made you afraid of a raised hand?" "Everyone," she whispered honestly. "I'm an Omega, and a traitor." "You are not a traitor," Kieran said firmly, "and you are not just an Omega." He reached out, moving so slowly that she had time to pull away, but she didn't. He brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. His fingers were calloused and hot, burning against her cold skin. The moment his skin touched hers, A jolt of electricity zipped through her body, sparking in her core. It wasn't the pain she was used to. It was completion. Kieran inhaled sharply, his pupils blowing wide. "Eat," he said, his voice rough. He pushed the bowl toward her. "We have much to discuss, Celeste, but first, you must heal. I will not let you die." He stood up, towering over her again, but the threat was gone. "I will be outside the door. If you need anything at all, you call my name. Do you understand?" Celeste nodded, bewildered. He turned to leave, but paused at the door, his hand gripping the frame so hard the wood groaned. "And Celeste, no one will ever hit you again. If anyone tries, I will rip their arm from their socket and feed it to them." He walked out, closing the door gently. Celeste stared at the door. She looked down at the soup. It smelled like roasted chicken and herbs. Her stomach roared. She took a sip. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. But as the warmth spread through her belly, a new fear took root. Jasper had thrown her away because she was inconvenient. Margot had tried to kill her because she was jealous. What did the Alpha King want? Men like him didn't save girls like her for free. She was a pet. That had to be it. A toy he had found in the snow. She finished the soup, her survival instinct overriding her fear. Whatever happened next, she would need her strength. 3 days passed. Celeste spent them in a haze of recovery. A doctor named Aris, a gentleman with grey hair and kind eyes, came to check on her every few hours. He applied salves to her frostbite, which was healing at a miraculous rate. "Your recovery is unusual," Dr. Aris muttered on the second day, changing the bandages on her feet. "Even for a wolf, you heal fast. But your wolf is dormant, isn't she?" "She's not dormant," Celeste murmured, looking out the massive window at the snowy peaks of the northern kingdom. "She's dead. I haven't been able to shift since I was 12. The elders said I was broken." Dr. Aris paused. He exchanged a look with Kieran, who was standing by the fireplace. Kieran had barely left her room. He sat in a velvet armchair, working on documents, or simply watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You aren't broken, child," Dr. Aris said softly. "I ran some blood tests. You have high concentrations of silver nitrate and wolfsbane in your system. Trace amounts, built up over years." Celeste froze. "Wolfsbane? But that kills us." "In large doses, yes," Kieran said, stepping forward. "In small, controlled doses, it suppresses the wolf. It makes you weak. It stops the shift. It mimics the symptoms of being an omega runt." Celeste felt the room spin. "You mean someone was poisoning me? For years?" "Since you were a child, most likely," Kieran said. His fists were clenched at his sides. "They didn't just exile you, Celeste. They systematically crippled you to keep you submissive." The revelation made her want to vomit. All those years of being called useless, of being mocked because she couldn't run with the pack, couldn't hunt, couldn't shift. It wasn't her fault. It was them. Margot, the elders, maybe even Jasper's father. "Why?" she whispered. "That is what I intend to find out," Kieran said darkly. That night, the fever hit. It started as a dull ache in her bones, deep in the marrow. By midnight, Celeste was thrashing in the sheets, sweat soaking through her nightgown. It felt like her skeleton was being pulled apart and reassembled by a madman. "Make it stop!" she screamed, clawing at the mattress. "Please, it hurts!" The door burst open. Kieran was there in a second. He didn't hesitate. He climbed onto the bed and pulled her thrashing body into his lap. "Shh, I've got you," he soothed, rocking her. "It's the blood, Celeste. My blood." "What?" she gasped, her back arching as a spasm of pain ripped through her spine. I gave you my blood in the woods to save your life, Kieran explained, brushing wet hair from her face. Lichen blood is potent. It's burning out the poison. It's waking her up. Waking who up? Your wolf. The pain intensified. Celeste screamed, a sound that started human and ended in a guttural snarl. Her jaw cracked, reshaping. Her eyes burned like acid. Focus on me, Kieran commanded. He grabbed her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. Celeste, look at me. Don't fight it. Let it happen. She looked into his violet eyes. They were glowing, anchoring her to reality. It hurts, she whimpered. I know, he said softly. Change is painful, but you are strong. You survived the Dead Lands. You can survive this. He leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. I am right here. I am not leaving. With a final, bone-shattering crack, the pain vanished, replaced by a surge of power so immense it made her gasp. The world shifted. She wasn't lying on the bed anymore. She was standing on 4 legs. The room looked different, sharper, brighter. The smells were overwhelming. She looked down at her paws. They weren't the small, brown paws of a common wolf. They were massive, and they were white, a pure, blinding white, like the snow she had almost died in. She turned her head to look at her flank. Her fur shimmered like stardust. She looked up at Kieran. The Alpha King was staring at her, an expression of awe on his face. He slowly reached out a hand. Beautiful, he whispered. A white wolf, the symbol of the moon goddess's judgment. Celeste, or rather, her wolf, Luna, leaned into his hand, chuffing softly. She felt powerful. She felt dangerous. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel small. Kieran smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his harsh face. Shift back, Celeste. We need to talk. The shift back was easier, though it left her exhausted and naked. Kieran immediately wrapped a fur blanket around her, averting his gaze with a gentlemanly respect that confused her. What am I? She asked, clutching the blanket, her voice trembling with the aftershocks of the power she had just felt. You are a dominant alpha female, Kieran said, handing her a glass of water. The poison suppressed it. My blood broke the seal. He sat on the edge of the bed, his expression serious. Celeste, there is something else. When I found you, when I touched you, did you feel it? She looked down at her hands. The spark? The bond, Kieran corrected. He looked deep into her eyes, and the intensity of his gaze stole the air from her lungs. I am not just saving a stray, Celeste. I hunted for 300 years to find you. He took her hand, turning it over to kiss the palm. You are my mate. You are the queen of the Lichen Kingdom. Celeste stared at him. The Alpha King. Her mate? It was impossible. She was the girl who scrubbed floors. She was the girl Jasper threw away. You're wrong, she whispered. Jasper rejected me. But he was supposed to be. Jasper is a boy playing with toys he doesn't understand, Kieran snarled, the violet in his eyes flaring. He didn't know what you were. He didn't deserve to breathe the same air as you. Kieran stood up, pacing the room, and he is going to learn that lesson very soon. What do you mean? Celeste asked. Kieran stopped at the window, looking out into the night. The Winter Solstice Summit begins in 2 days. Every Alpha in the continent is coming to renew their treaties, including the Alpha of Frost Hollow. He turned back to her, a cruel, predatory smile curling his lips. They think you are dead, Celeste. They think they got away with murder. Imagine their faces when the doors open and you walk in, not as the Omega they threw in the snow, but as the Lichen Queen wearing my mark. Celeste felt a cold shiver run down her spine, but this time it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. "They will pay?" she asked softly. "They will bleed," Kieran promised, "but only if you want them to. The choice is yours, my queen. Do we hide you, or do we make them bow?" Celeste thought of Margot's laughter. She thought of Jasper's cold eyes as he turned his back. She thought of the cold snow. She looked up at Kieran, her eyes flashing with a new silver light. "I have nothing to wear to a summit," she said. Kieran's grin widened. "I think we can find you a dress." The lichen citadel was a fortress carved directly into the side of the obsidian mountains. It was a place of sharp angles, black stone, and military precision, a stark contrast to the rustic, wooden pack house Celeste had grown up in. Here, wealth wasn't just whispered, it was shouted in the tapestries woven with gold thread and the chandeliers dripping with diamonds. But Celeste saw none of it. She was standing in front of a floor-to-length mirror in the royal suite, staring at a stranger. "It fits perfectly, my queen," the tailor murmured, stepping back with a bow. The dress was a weapon in silk form. It was a deep, blood-red velvet that clung to her curves like a second skin, flaring out at the bottom in a dramatic train. The back was entirely open, exposing the creamy skin that had been bruised and beaten only days ago. Now, thanks to the lichen blood and her awakening, her skin was flawless, glowing with a subtle pearlescent sheen. Celeste touched her own reflection. Her hair, once dull and brittle, cascaded down her back in glossy, chestnut waves, but it was her eyes that held her attention. They were no longer the soft, submissive hazel of an omega. They were rimmed with silver, the mark of the moon goddess's favor. "You look dangerous," a voice rumbled from the doorway. Celeste turned. Kieran was leaning against the doorframe, watching her. He was dressed in a formal black tuxedo, the jacket tailored to accommodate his massive shoulders. He looked every inch the king, regal, terrifying, and breathtakingly handsome. "I feel terrified," Celeste admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "Kieran, they are all alphas, the strongest wolves on the continent. And I'm just me." Kieran walked over to her, the heavy thud of his boots swallowed by the plush carpet. He stood behind her, his dark reflection towering over hers in the mirror. He placed his large hands on her bare shoulders, his thumbs tracing the line of her collarbone. "You are not just you anymore," he said, his voice low and fierce. "You are the white wolf. You are the only creature on this earth that can bring me to my knees. Do you understand that power, Celeste?" He leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. "Tonight, you are not the victim. You are the judge, and they are the defendants." "Will Jasper be there?" she asked, looking at their joined reflections. "He arrived an hour ago," Kieran said, his eyes darkening, "with the woman. Margot." The name sent a spike of adrenaline through Celeste's veins. "Does he know?" "No one knows," Kieran promised. "I have locked down the citadel. As far as the Frost Hollow Pack is concerned, you are a frozen corpse in the Deadlands. They are currently drinking my wine and boasting about their territory, completely unaware that their executioner is getting dressed upstairs." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a necklace, a choker of white gold, set with a single, massive teardrop ruby that matched her dress. "This is the heart of the North," Kieran explained as he fastened it around her neck. "It has been worn by every lichen queen for 1,000 years. When you walk into that room wearing this, they won't just see a girl. They will see the crown." He turned her around to face him. "Are you ready to take back what they stole from you?" Celeste took a deep breath. She thought of the cold snow. She thought of the fear. Then She reached deep inside and found the white wolf, Luna. The wolf was pacing, eager for the hunt. "I'm ready," Celeste whispered. Meanwhile, in the grand foyer of the citadel, Alpha Jasper of the Frost Hollow Pack was feeling good. "Stop fidgeting," Margot hissed, smoothing down the front of her expensive, but ill-fitting, white sequined gown. "We need to make a good impression. If we can secure a trade deal with the Southern Alphas, we won't need the Council's funding anymore." Jasper took a sip of champagne, looking around the opulent hall. Hundreds of Alphas were mingling, the air thick with the scent of power and testosterone. I have a bad feeling, Margot. The king summoned us personally. He never does that." "Because he recognizes talent," Margot scoffed, linking her arm through his. "Or maybe he heard about how we handled the traitor. It shows we have a zero-tolerance policy. Kings respect strength, Jasper." "We left her to die," Jasper muttered, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting Celeste's ghost to appear. "It wasn't honorable." "Honor is for losers," Margot snapped. "She was a liability. She's gone. Forgotten? Now smile. Alpha Sterling is looking this way." Jasper forced a smile, but the knot in his stomach wouldn't loosen. He had been having nightmares since that day. Dreams of Celeste crying in the snow. He pushed the thought away. Margot was right. Celeste was the past. Tonight was about the future. He had no idea that his future was about to end. The grand ballroom was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. The chatter of 300 wealthy, powerful werewolves created a dull roar that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Suddenly, the heavy brass trumpets sounded. The room went dead silent instantly. The massive double doors at the top of the grand staircase groaned open. "All hail!" the royal herald bellowed, his voice magically amplified to reach every corner of the hall. "His Majesty, King Kieran of the Volkov-Lycan bloodline, ruler of the North, the shadow of the mountains." Kieran stepped out onto the landing. The aura of power he projected was so intense that several Alphas on the floor below instinctively lowered their heads. He didn't smile. He scanned the crowd like a general surveying a battlefield, but he didn't descend the stairs. He held out his hand to the darkness of the hallway behind him. "And," the herald's voice wavered slightly, as if even he couldn't believe what he was reading. "Her Majesty. The Queen." A collective gasp ripped through the room. The king had a mate? It was impossible. He had been alone for centuries. Celeste stepped into the light. If the room was quiet before, it was now a vacuum. She was a vision of vengeance in red. The dress flowed around her like liquid fire. The ruby at her throat glinted under the chandeliers. She stood tall, her chin lifted, her hand resting lightly in Kieran's. She looked down at the sea of faces, and she found them. Near the front, close to the buffet tables, stood Jasper and Margot. Jasper's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. Margot's mouth hung open, her face draining of all color, until she looked like a corpse. "Shall we?" Kieran asked, loud enough for the room to hear. "We shall," Celeste replied, her voice steady and clear. They descended the stairs together, step by synchronized step. Every eye followed them. As they reached the floor, the crowd parted like the Red Sea, creating a wide path that led directly to where the Frost Hollow Pack stood frozen. Kieran led her straight to them. He stopped 5 feet away, his violet eyes boring into Jasper's soul. "Alpha Jasper," Kieran said, his voice silky and terrifying. "I don't believe you've met my mate." Jasper was shaking. He couldn't help it. The scent coming off Celeste was overwhelming. Pure high-grade alpha pheromones mixed with the royal lichen scent. It forced his wolf to whimper in submission. Celeste? Jasper stammered. But you're dead, Celeste finished for him. She offered him a cold, sharp smile. I almost was. It's amazing what a little snow can do to a person's perspective, isn't it, Jasper? This is impossible, Margot shrieked. The shock had given way to her natural nastiness. She pointed a manicured finger at Celeste. This is a trick! She's an Omega! She's a servant! She's a traitor who poisoned our pack! The accusation rang out across the silent ballroom. The other alphas murmured, confused. A queen who was a traitor? Kieran didn't shout. He didn't even move. He just looked at Margot. Did you just point a finger at your queen? Kieran asked softly. She is not a queen, Margot yelled, losing all sense of self-preservation. She's garbage. We threw her out. We dragged her to the border and dumped her. Margot, shut up, Jasper hissed, grabbing her arm. He realized too late the trap they had walked into. No. Let her speak, Celeste said, stepping out from behind Kieran's protection. She walked up to Margot. Celeste was wearing heels, making her taller than the other woman. Tell them, Margot. Tell everyone how you found wolfsbane under my mattress. Tell them how you convinced the pack to exile me without a trial. I did what had to be done, Margot spat. You were a threat. I was a threat because I was the true alpha, Celeste said, her voice dropping to a growl. And you knew it. You knew my bloodline was stronger than Jasper's, so you poisoned me for years to keep me weak. Lies! Margot screamed. She lunged. It was a fatal mistake. Before Margot's hand could even reach Celeste's hair, Celeste moved. It was a blur of motion. She caught Margot's wrist, twisted it with a sickening crunch, and kicked her legs out from under her. Margot hit the floor hard. Before she could scramble up, Celeste's heel was pressed against her throat. I am the White Wolf, Celeste announced, her voice echoing off the walls, laced with the command tone that forced every wolf in the room to freeze. I am the mate of the king. And you, Margot, are a pest. Celeste looked up at Jasper. He was staring at her, but not with hatred, with horror. And regret. Jasper, Celeste said, you had a choice. You could have investigated. You could have trusted the girl you grew up with. Instead, you listened to her. You watched them drag me. You watched me freeze. Celeste, Jasper choked out, tears forming in his eyes. I didn't know. I swear, I thought. You didn't think, Kieran interrupted, stepping up beside Celeste. He placed a hand on the small of her back. You failed as an alpha. You failed to protect your pack. And you tried to murder my queen. Kieran looked at the crowd. What is the punishment for regicide, for attempting to kill a member of the royal family? Death! The crowd roared in unison, eager to please their king. Jasper fell to his knees. Mercy! King Kieran, please! Mercy! Mercy! Kieran laughed, a dark, humorless sound. I don't know the meaning of the word, but my mate might. He looked at Celeste. What is your will, my queen? Do we kill them here? The floor is marble, it cleans easily. The room held its breath. Celeste looked down at Margot, who was sobbing beneath her boot, and Jasper, the man she had once loved, now kneeling in his own cowardice. She could kill them. It would be easy. It would feel good. But then she looked at the necklace she wore, the heart of the North. Queens didn't just kill, they ruled. Death is too easy, Celeste said, removing her foot from Margot's throat. Margot gasped for air, scrambling backward. Then what? Kieran asked, intrigued. Strip them, Celeste commanded. Excuse me? Jasper looked up, wide-eyed. You took my home. You took my dignity. You took my clothes and sent me into the snow with nothing, Celeste said coldly. So, I am returning the favor." She turned to the royal guards. "Strip them of their titles, strip them of their rank, and strip them of their clothes." "Now?" a guard asked. "Right now," Celeste said, "and then throw them out the front gates." "But it's a blizzard outside," Jasper whispered, his face pale. Celeste smiled, and it was a smile that would haunt him forever. "I know. Better start running, Jasper. If the cold doesn't take you, the rogues will." As the guards moved in to seize the screaming Margot and the defeated Jasper, Celeste turned her back on them. She took Kieran's arm. "I believe there is a buffet," she said calmly. "I'm starving." Kieran looked down at her with pure, unadulterated adoration. "As you wish, my queen." The heavy oak doors of the citadel slammed shut, sealing out the howling wind and the screams of the exiled traitors. Inside the grand ballroom, the silence was deafening. The remaining alphas of the continent stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the woman in the red dress who had just sentenced 2 of their own to death by ice. The tension was thick enough to choke on. They were waiting for the other shoe to drop. They were waiting to see if the White Wolf's rage would consume them all. Celeste felt her knees tremble. The adrenaline that had fueled her dramatic confrontation was draining away, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion. She had done it. She had exacted her revenge. Jasper and Margot were gone, facing the exact same fate they had forced upon her. But why didn't she feel triumphant? She just felt heavy. Kieran sensed her shift in mood instantly. He didn't care about the hundreds of watching eyes. He turned to her, wrapping his massive arms around her waist and pulling her into his chest. "Breathe," he whispered into her hair, his voice a low rumble that vibrated against her ribcage. "It is done. You are safe." "Did I go too far?" Celeste whispered, burying her face in his tuxedo jacket. "Does this make me as bad as them?" Kieran pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "Justice is not cruelty, Celeste. They attempted to murder a queen. In the old laws, I would have been required to slaughter their entire bloodline. You showed mercy by sparing their pack. You only punished the guilty." He turned to the crowd, his face hardening into the mask of the Alpha King. "The summit is adjourned for the evening," he bellowed. "Return to your quarters. Tomorrow, we discuss the new order of the North." The Alphas scrambled to obey, bowing low as they backed out of the room, eager to escape the intense aura of the royal couple. Within minutes, the ballroom was empty, save for the royal guards and a small, huddled group of people near the back. It was the Frost Hollow delegation, the elders, her aunt, Sarah, her cousin, Miller, the people who had watched her eat scraps from the floor for 10 years. Kieran growled low in his throat, stepping in front of Celeste, but she placed a hand on his arm. "No," she said softly. "Let me handle this." She walked toward them. They flinched as she approached, the click of her heels echoing on the marble. Her Aunt Sarah, a woman who used to slap Celeste's hands if she touched the fresh bread, fell to her knees. "Celeste," Sarah wept, clutching at the hem of the red velvet dress. "Please, we didn't know. Margot, she threatened us. We had no choice." "There is always a choice," Celeste said, her voice devoid of warmth. She looked down at them. She remembered the cold nights in the attic. She remembered begging Miller for a blanket, only to be laughed at. "I should banish you all," Celeste said quietly. "I should strip the Frost Hollow name from history and let the land go wild." The group sobbed, pressing their foreheads to the floor. "But," Celeste continued, her voice strengthening, "I am not Margot, and I am not Jasper. I do not kill the weak just because I can." She signaled to Silas, the Beta Guard. "Silas, you will travel to Frost Hollow tomorrow. You will assume temporary command of the pack." Me, my queen? Silas asked, surprised. Yes. You will retrain them. You will tear down the hierarchy that abuses omegas. You will teach them that strength comes from unity, not cruelty. And if they resist, Celeste looked down at her aunt with eyes of silver fire. If they resist, burn the pack house to the ground. Thank you, my queen, Sarah cried, kissing the floor. Get out of my sight, Celeste whispered. As the guards escorted the sobbing remnants of her past life away, Celeste finally let out a long, shuddering breath. The weight lifted. She hadn't just taken revenge, she had broken the cycle. The coronation. 2 weeks later, the citadel was transformed. The grim fortress was draped in banners of silver and midnight blue. It was the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, and the night of the coronation. Celeste sat in the dressing room, staring at the crown resting on the velvet cushion. It was made of white gold, woven to look like antlers and thorns, encrusted with diamonds and moonstones. It was heavy. You look beautiful, Kieran said. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo today. He was shirtless, wearing ceremonial trousers and a heavy fur cloak made from the pelts of the great cave bears. Ancient symbols were painted in blue woad across his chest and arms, runes of protection, bonding, and power. He walked up behind her. Are you ready to bind your soul to mine? Once we do this, there is no going back. Our lifespans will link. We will live together for centuries. Celeste stood up. She was wearing a dress of white lace and silk, simple yet elegant. She turned and placed her hands on his tattooed chest. I spent my whole life being invisible, Kieran. I thought I would die alone in the snow. You gave me a life I didn't know existed. I don't want to go back. I want forever. Kieran smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had won the greatest war of all. They walked out onto the balcony of the citadel. Below them, in the massive courtyard, thousands of wolves had gathered. Not just alphas, but common wolves, omegas, and families from all over the kingdom. They were holding torches, creating a sea of fire in the dark night. When Kieran and Celeste appeared, the roar was deafening. Long live the king! Long live the white wolf! The high priestess, an ancient woman with eyes entirely white from blindness, stepped forward. She held a chalice of moon water. Tonight, the priestess intoned, her voice carrying over the wind, the moon goddess unites the shadow and the light. Kieran knelt before Celeste. The crowd gasped. An alpha king never knelt. I, Kieran Volkov, he swore, his voice rough with emotion, pledge my blood, my breath, and my bone to you. I will hunt for you. I will kill for you. I will die for you. He took a ceremonial dagger and made a small cut on his palm. Celeste did the same. They clasped hands, their blood mixing. The magic was immediate. A beam of pure silver moonlight pierced the clouds, striking the balcony. Celeste threw her head back as power rushed into her. She felt Kieran's soul snap into place next to hers, a permanent, comforting presence in the back of her mind. She could feel his love, his fierce protectiveness, his unyielding devotion. The priestess lifted the crown and placed it on Celeste's head. Arise, Celeste Volkov, Queen of the Lycans, Keeper of the North. Celeste stood, the power of the white wolf surging to the surface. She couldn't help it. She shifted. Her clothes shredded away in a mist of magic, and in her place stood the massive white wolf, glowing under the moonlight, the diamond crown magically resizing to sit upon her lupine brow. Kieran shifted too, his massive black wolf towering beside her. Together they threw their heads back and howled. It wasn't a mournful sound. It was a song of victory. It echoed off the obsidian mountains, rolling across the valleys, reaching even the furthest corners of the Deadlands. Miles away, deep in the frozen heart of the Deadlands, the snow had stopped falling. The silence was absolute. There were no animals here, no birds, just the endless biting cold. Two figures sat near the base of a twisted black tree. They were huddled together, stripped to their undergarments, their skin blue and covered in frost. Jasper's eyes were open, frozen in a permanent expression of terror. He was looking toward the south, toward the home he had foolishly thrown away. Margot was curled into a ball beside him. She looked smaller in death, her vanity stripped away by the indifferent ice. They were statues now, monuments to greed and betrayal. A lone raven landed on Jasper's frozen shoulder. It tilted its head, listening to the wind. Far in the distance, a howl cut through the night. It was powerful, regal, and full of life. The raven cawed once, then took flight, soaring toward the sound, leaving the frozen king and queen of nothing behind in the dark. Celeste was right. The cold had taken them, but in the warmth of the citadel, surrounded by a pack that adored her, and a mate who worshipped the ground she walked on, the white wolf had finally found her spring. Celeste's journey from a rejected Omega, left to die in the snow to the crowned queen of the Lycans, is a reminder that true strength isn't about rank or bloodline. It's about resilience. The Frost Hollow pack made the fatal mistake of judging her worth by her title, never realizing that the most powerful wolf in existence was serving them tea. In the end, karma was served cold. Jasper and Margot faced the exact fate they sentenced Celeste to, proving that the universe has a way of balancing the scales. Celeste didn't just survive, she thrived, finding a love in King Kieran that was worth waiting lifetimes for. She proved that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, revenge, and epic romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more werewolf stories like this one. What did you think of Celeste's revenge? Did Jasper and Margot deserve their fate? Or was it too harsh? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I post new, drama-filled romances every week. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.